And the game of the year is... Oh,
Me! Yep, that's me. Winner of Game of the Year, even though I'm not a game and I didn't come out that year. I was just so good that I deserved the title anyways. So, as a previous winner, I thought I could enlighten you all and help you predict who would win this and future Games of the Year, just in case they decide not to award me twice. But how do you predict a Game of the Year? Well, the best way is by learning from the past. So I'm gonna look at all the... What? How does that even happen, man? And to the box that had all but 4 of the games too? Ugh, darn, now I have to make a shorter video and skip over so many games I didn't play. Well, I guess 4 games should be enough to get my point across. Now, the games that we'll talk about are winners of the Game Awards Game of the Year, since they are the most popular of all the awards. I think. Either way, it's fundamental to pick only one event so you can actually learn what they consider worthy of Game of the Year. For example, my friend Jeremy said his Game of the Year for 2023 was Payday 3. This teaches us that Jeremy has wrong opinions and can't be trusted. Fortunately for the runtime of this video, the Game Awards are a little more complicated to figure out, hopefully. So let's get on to the first game. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is a game released for the Nintendo Switch and no other console. Apparently, Nintendo had this inside joke about releasing it on this thing that had like a tablet as a controller, which made it extremely expensive and was mostly useless. Thank God that doesn't exist. Anyways, Breath of the Wild came out in 2017, which is nearly 9 years ago at the time of this video. I just wanted to mention it so you feel old. No other reason. When Breath of the Wild came out, it was a giant change for The Legend of Zelda. It went from exploring a vast world while progressing towards a greater goal to exploring a vast world with the ability to progress towards a greater goal. Okay, simplified this much, it doesn't sound like a big change. Side content and exploration aren't exactly new to the Legend of Zelda franchise, but it's about how Breath of the Wild goes about it that makes it very different. First of all, exploration and being a sandbox are now the main focus. The easiest way to tell is the story and abilities. Now, as a certified lore expert, I can give a perfect explanation of the story. Okay, so it all begins when Ganon wants to see this twink obliterated. And then Link's boyfriend Armaldo finds Shadow the Hedgehog and Optimus Prime and... Huh? Really? 5 hours down the drain for this. Man... So I've been informed that instead of reading the lore of the Breath of the Wild, I read the gay fanfic, The Lord of Breath of the Wild. Frankly, this is just a scam for dyslexic people. I did find it weird that there were multiple makeout scenes, but I thought Nintendo had just become cool all of a sudden. So no story for you. Fortunately, you don't even need to engage with it. If you want, you can go straight to Ganon and skip past everything. The only downside is that you will be weaker and the fight will be harder. But if you can get past that obstacle, you could beat this game in a time most people would describe as speedrunning. Other than the difficulty, the main reason not to do that is that you would be skipping about 99% of the game. This whole system of how the main quest is structured is radically different to previous games. They were kind of like Metroidvanias in some ways, forcing you to get tons of upgrades and following a somewhat linear path to reach the end. Breath of the Wild shook this system up quite a bit with its new take on upgrades/abilities. As I said, before you ran around and slowly gathered all the upgrades which had very specific uses. In Breath of the Wild, by the end of what is considered the tutorial, you have been given about 90% of the upgrades, and they are all basically just tools that you can use to mess around or solve puzzles, and so they aren't really made for very specific uses. There are situations where a certain tool is clearly intended to be used, but the main focus with them was clearly to let you be creative with how you use and combine them, which directly feeds into the main gameplay loop being very sandbox oriented, basically letting you loose in this world to ruin it at your leisure. Now, I could definitely go on, but if I talked in depth about each game, I think I would be here until the end of the Game Awards. So instead, I'm only gonna focus on what I feel is the core of the game, as that is the most important thing to analyze, and in this case, it's the sandbox open world. So what can we glean from this? Well, first of all, considering that 99% of the story is literally optional, we now know that good gameplay and lots of content can replace the need for a story. Next, we have popularity. When Breath of the Wild came out, it was the game to play, and everyone bought a Switch for it because it didn't release anywhere else. And that surely affected its rating. Next, and this one is a bit controversial, war crimes. Now, we all know that war crimes are popular, so by appealing to the war criminals in the critics booth by breaking at least one or two rules of the Geneva Convention, you guarantee yourself a positive vote. Breath of the Wild allows you to plunder civilian property and then plant a mine in their bedroom, satisfying this requirement. The final thing I think we can all learn from Breath of the Wild is having your protagonist be a Twink of the Year award winner is a fast track to Game of the Year. So let's see, who is the next winner I'm gonna talk about? I may have to change that one. God of War 2018 continues the tradition of reboots which need the release year added on the name whenever talked about. And while it does technically continue the story of previous games, it's still clearly a reboot. The gameplay is radically different as Kratos has aged and got into the ancient age of 30 and cannot move quite as fast as he used to, making combat a bit slower and less gory. And this is the less gory one, by the way. Other big changes for the gameplay are RPG mechanics and an open world and a lot of other stuff, but by far the biggest and most important change is the story, with the game being focused on it now instead of being something in the background. However, to avoid spoilers, and definitely not because it's really long and I don't want to replay all of it to get footage, I won't be talking about it too much. Putting my intellectual hat on, what I enjoyed most about it is Kratos dealing with who he was, since this time his character is actually pretty fleshed out, acknowledging that he was a bit of a two-dimensional character and actually engaging with that as part of the story was very interesting, especially because of the circumstances Kratos is in, which furthermore, Kratos be dad now, and he reaches a new level of protective parent. You have heard of tiger moms? Now get ready for God Killer Dad. The relationship between Kratos and his son Atreus is the main focus of the story, with a side dish of dealing with your past. I would go on, but I don't know where my intellectual hat is, and I need it to sound smart, so let's check back on our checklist. No story? Nope, lots of story. Good gameplay with lots of content? I wouldn't say no, but it's definitely not what carries the game, so like half yes? Popular? Yes, it was very popular at release. War crimes? Half a tick, put more heart in it next time. So it appears my list is missing quite a bit. For example, it seems I was wrong about no story being totally fine, so let's add good story instead of it. Then let's add good looks. And no, I don't mean me this time. I mean graphically, but more importantly, stylistically. How good does the game look? And how cinematic is it? Then, of course, family appeal. In this case, God of War aimed for the single dad demographic, with its family fun story, and I mean, that's just extra points, obviously. The last thing I would add is accessibility. Obviously, if only me, Iota 11, and Greg can understand and enjoy a game, it will have a hard time winning any awards. So a game that's a lot more accessible is key to winning Game of the Year. And I think accessibility is definitely one of the boons that Elden Ring has to elevate it over other Souls titles. It's also the only game, as far as I'm aware, to be nominated in 2 different years, technically. Though in 2024, the DLC was nominated, but it's still part of the game, so I'd say it counts. So there must be tons to learn from this one if it was good enough to be nominated twice. The first thing you need to know about Elden Ring is that it's a Souls-like, a genre named after the previous games of developer FromSoft. And like every other Souls-like, it's set in a bleak, depressing world with tons and tons of lore that you mostly gather from item descriptions and context clues. Things that a casual player will absolutely ignore and just nod along, pretending to know whoever the game introduced to you by saying, "You know them, right? You did that thing together that one time. What was it again?" Whatever, I'm sure you two have a lot of catching up to do. I say this even though I'm a self-certified lore expert, I have to admit that the story is a lot less like God of War and a lot more like Breath of the Wild in terms of how important it is. So let's instead talk about the real star of the show, the gameplay. It plays basically identically to other FromSoft Souls-likes when it comes to the basics. You roll, you hit, and you complain about the camera controls. The biggest thing that sets Elden Ring aside from other Souls-like is that it's a big, gigantic open world. Yes, actually kinda like Breath of the Wild in this too. Just like in Breath of the Wild's case, previous Souls games had explorations and semi-big open maps, but Elden Ring takes it to a whole new level, with a singular massive map filled with stuff to do and no singular clear path forward. They really don't guide you at all, there's absolutely nothing to point you anywhere, so you explore at your own pace. The first and most important lesson that Elden Ring teaches you about its open world is that you will encounter enemies that are a bit too strong for you right now, and that leaving is totally okay in the intended gameplay. Coward! You're a fake gamer and a coward! Unfortunately, to talk about what I feel was the biggest and most important change from other Souls-likes, I also have to address the worst part of the Souls-like community and their reaction to this stuff. Elden Ring has so much stuff available to you, and so much of it is super strong or really useful. For example, summons which can be used to get some meat shields that distract bosses. There are also tons of super cool spells and many more extremely cool and fun weapons. However, a very loud but small part of the Souls-like community has earned a bit of a reputation for being extremely elitist. Summons? Nope, the developers don't intend for you to use this thing they put in the game, so you are clearly playing it wrong. Spells? Are you joking? Do you think this is some kind of RPG? Cool and strong weapons? You might as well install Cheat Engine and insta-kill bosses while you're at it. You will quickly learn that according to these people, the only way to play the game right is naked with a club at level 1. Anything else is cheating. However, the reason why I like this game and why I think it has the mass appeal it does is thanks to all these options. Just the fact that you can pretty much always come back to a boss later after killing something else to power you up gives you way more reason to explore and allows you to mitigate the challenge of fights with preparation. On top of this, the fights themselves are super fun and cool, some of the best of the entire genre, even when I play the game more like Monster Hunter than Dark Souls. Now, before I move on to analyzing why this game won, something important to talk about is that in 2022, when this came out, there was a huge debate online between Elden Ring fans and God of War Ragnarok fans on which game would win Game of the Year. To simplify the argument for the sake of time, Elden Ring was more focused on having good gameplay and God of War Ragnarok was more focused on its story. And Elden Ring was the one that ended up winning. From this, we can extrapolate that gameplay is valued higher than story, even in a close race like this. So let's go through it. Good story? It's not bad, but it's not the main focus. You basically have to go out of your way to learn it. Good gameplay with lots of content? Absolutely. The map is massive and full of stuff to do. Popular? Extremely. This was FromSoft's biggest game by far. War crimes? Well, it would have gotten the point, but the war criminal judges decided it was a little too horny about them, so they took the point away. Good looks? Yes. Even though technically it's not the best looking game, the art direction and style really carry it. Family appeal? Well, although in surveys around the globe it was found to have way too much incest and murder for 99% of families, the survey done for the Game of the Year is given to the members of the Habsburgs, and they found it to have great family appeal. So, I guess? Accessibility? If you ignore the people who are telling you you're playing the game wrong, it's the most accessible FromSoft game yet. The list is looking quite good, but I'm still gonna add one more category, which is absolutely crucial on deciding what game will win Game of the Year. Is it one of Vinci's favorite games of all time? And unfortunately, it fails in this category, so I will be taking its Game of the Year title for myself. Now, a game that does fit that requirement, Baldur's Gate 3. Now, because this is a serious journalist investigation, except for all those times I lie, I probably need to say that I love this game. So I might be biased, but I'm always extremely biased, so I don't think it will change much. Baldur's Gate 3 is an RPG. Why did I say it like that? Because it goes hard on the RP part of RPG. It really lets you roleplay as your character, and gives you pretty much every option you would like. I basically never found myself wishing for a dialogue option that wasn't there. Quests allow allow for a ton of different approaches and options. The world feels alive and you feel like a part of it instead of feeling like the world exists around you and your character. And ouch. Oh, alright. Game of the year, yes. Baldur's Gate 3 is a CRPG based on the D&D 5th edition, the only edition of D&D people under 30 have played, though it doesn't follow it to the letter, making some changes that many people started using in their games like, okay, I'll stay on track. It follows a party of adventurers and their quest to not become Squidward's older brother, and on their way stumbling upon all sorts of weird stuff. The amount of things packed into this game is absolutely insane. I was replaying it for this video and got hooked and procrastinated, and I stumbled upon tons of things I had never seen before and made new choices which will change the game even more down the line, as quests extremely frequently affect events later in the story and unlock new content. All this attached to extremely good writing, a super fun combat system thanks to all the items and combinations you can brew up, like for example, well, if it wasn't obvious, I really can't pick one thing alone that this game excels at, or is clearly the core experience. And that's why it gets a pass on everything. The story, the gameplay, the visuals, the war crimes, the family appeal, the being one of my favorite games of all time, everything. No, I'm not biased, I'm right, and that's different. So, what did we learn? Baldur's Gate 3 is an amazing game, but that's obvious, so it's not very useful. With Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok, we learned that gameplay is considered more important than story. With God of War 2018, we learned that story can be more important than gameplay, and that accessibility is important. And with Breath of the Wild, we learned that war crimes and popularity are pretty important. Alright, I can use this to create an equation which will predict the winner of the Game of the Year for any year. And it's done! We sum up the value of everything, multiply it by popularity, divide it by every negative score, and finally throw the equation in the garbage. Because the Game of the Year will be the game you liked most from that year. And so it's pointless to continue talking like this because it's not true at all. Did you really believe any of that? Huh? The game you liked the most? What a joke! The Game of the Year every year from now until forever is me! My story? Unmatched. My gameplay? Incomprehensible. My popularity? Interdimensional. My war crimes? Extreme and plentiful. My looks? Perfect. My family appeal? Rated MFE, mandatory for everyone. My accessibility? Beyond quantum physics. And I am my favorite game. Ha! I will never look. Well, now the rules say that you need to be a video game and can't be a sentient being no matter how good you are. This is so unfair. I even bought a new cabinet specifically for all the Game of the Year awards. Damn. Well, whatever. I'm gonna continue doing a little game at the end here, by the way. So guess what game I'm in to receive nothing, but you'll seem smart. Anyways, subscribe, like, comment about the guessing game or about how unfair it is that I don't get to win Game of the Year every year. And memorize the link to this video to be repeated continuously whenever the topic of Game of the Year gets brought up.